Well, welcome back to segment 2. I want to paint a picture for you, a picture of a family tree, right? You look at your mom, your father, your mom, his father, his mom, and you go back as far as you can, and suddenly you hit a part of the tree that has no leaves, that no one can answer what happened to that particular branch. Well, that's the story of a group of people along the continent of Africa, and also the story of a group of people in the diaspora, Latin America, in the Caribbean, United States. And the confusion of what happened is a very deep thing. And I think that we need to take the time to unearth that for a minute, because when you don't know, you have to make assumptions. When you don't know and you haven't been taught how to research, assumptions come in. Well, you sold us because of this, and we argued because of this, and we didn't know what we were selling you to. And all of these questions that have come up over the years, we're here to talk about. I'm here with Coumba Toure, out of Senegal, West Africa, born in Mali, West Africa, a longtime friend. 30 years of just feeding off of each other and knowing that we have things that we need to do in terms of answering those questions across the waters. Welcome back to Pivotal Times for segment 2.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you for bringing up these important questions and conversation, because if we don't have them, who will?
Who will? Well, we know who will, and that's part of why we're here, right? Because when you look at the colonial experience in your country and the surrounding area, and I look at what we are dealing with now, even out of Florida, right? The whole critical race theory conversation is a hotbed here. If we don't write about it and we don't tell it, who will? And so, you know, there are groups, pockets of people who are beginning to say, well, let's make sure that these stories come to the forefront. When we talk about those questions, those unknowings, where we left off was the whole colonial dynamic, right, on the continent, that it wasn't just what African Americans or, you know, those of us who were on the boats went through. It's also what those who stayed behind went through that a lot of times we don't know here. Talk to us and just really briefly give us a picture of what happened once Africans were pulled away from different nations.
What people need to understand is that, again, our people on the continent went through hundreds of years of colonial subjugation. And you could take it any way you want, but it affects not only our economies, our education, our religions, everything. And to this day, it is still affecting us and how we live, because people always think of these things, think of the past. And because we talk about education, I just give you one simple example to trace education system. If you go to Senegal, and you can go to different places, but if you go to Senegal, in a small city called Saint-Louis, Ndar, you'll find still the building of the School of Hostages.
Right, which is what sparked this conversation for us.
Yes. And you can look it up. Ecoles des Otages. French people called things what they were. Schools of hostages, where you held hostage children of people that you colonize, that you subjugate, because of course we had a model of leadership that was transmitted by generation through families, and people always know, okay, you can kill the parents, but most of the time the family will try to always raise again the children to come back and rebel.
Right.
And so what they needed to do was to take the children into the school of hostage for two reasons. One is, when you have those kids, the people, you know, will have to stay put, because they know you have their kids as hostage. Wow. Number two, you can train those kids and teach them to despise their own people, to hate themselves, if I can call it themselves, because they learn that everything they are, everything their parents, their families are, is backward, and what they need to be is progressive and is French. And they also learn not only the languages, the ways to be, the ways of thinking, but they learn that their role is now to help their people become that way.
Wow.
But they also taught to be servants of the colonial, because what the colonial need is not somebody who's going to do something very, special for their people. No, they need people who can be, translators for them, cooks for them, do whatever they need. So you basically raise, people that will be servant to you, and they become the elite of our countries.
Right.
Now, I talk about School of Hostages because that school evolved into becoming the school of the son of chiefs. It evolved to become École Nationale William Ponty and the School of Teacher Training School.
Oh, so now it has a different name, but same process.
But the building is there, but also the mindset of considering that education is for an elite group of people, and education is to train a certain number of people to be part of the system and help the colonizer. And those who got those first educations, of course, become the people who are closer to the colonizer and the collaborators, but also they become the people who had the most mean. And you can just tell through time how we are where we are today.
Correct.
Led by people who are born from that mindset.
So, Coumba, you have given us a whole year of study in like 7 minutes. School of the Hostage. When you said that to me, I said, oh, absolutely, we're going to talk about it. Because when I look at the public education system here, I thought, oh, School of the Hostage. That there are things that are held captive, not just historically, but in terms of tapping into the gifts and callings and talents of our children. School of the Hostage, where our children's gifts and talents are held behind a system that does not allow for true education, which is bringing it out. And so when we look at the things that are happening with Governor DeSantis in Florida, and we look at all of the banning of education, of what took place in this country, I would venture to say that that is not a happenstance, that it is calculated, and it's something that needs to come to the forefront. In the book of Daniel, biblically, the same thing happened. Daniel was put inside of a training in the king's camp and told, you eat like this, you wear these clothing, you do it this way so that you come up under the king. And he refused and said, this is the way that I was trained to eat. This is the way that, and so we find throughout history in the Holocaust, one of the first things they did was separate the parents from the children so that the children could then come under the Germans. It's a tactic of war. Those trees and those branches that I mentioned earlier are not gone because the wind just haphazardly blew them. They were plucked away. The Bible says that Jesus came to turn the hearts of the fathers to the children. So one of the first things that begins to happen is the separation of parents from children. When Coco Gauff won the U.S. Open, one of the things that I applaud her so tremendously for was she said, no, my father and I are very close. And if he had not stepped in and said I needed another trainer, I would not have even known it. He orchestrated that. So she didn't allow that wedge to come between her and her father. She understood, no, she said, he's still the captain. Don't get it in any way twisted. So she didn't allow that confusion that a lot of people are trying to play in the media to happen. And that's one of the first things that those schools did was train the children to understand that your parents don't know what they're talking about. Go and actually train the parents now. And so that's a very insidious thing. And so over here, when we look at African American history or African studies, and you begin to see that those are seen as things that are criminal or things that are forcing one group of people to feel ashamed versus we're just telling the facts. Before we can put an opinion on it, let's just look at the facts. Like one of the things that I've over the years even argued for is the numbers that went through the transatlantic slave trade.
For many years, the Atlantic slave trade was legal.
Yeah, for sure.
So legal meant that when they left the shore, you didn't have the exact name of the people,
Right.
but you have the name of the ship. You have the name of the captain of the ship. You have the number of people that was embarked. And when they disembark, you have the number of the people that got off. Some people went and did that research, put it on a graphic, and you can look at it and see the ships moving. You can click on a dot and see the name of the ship and the number of people. And you can see where the ships went.
Wow.
So people cannot tell us. And this is only during the time when it was legal. So remember,
not to mention
when
illegal trade. Yeah.
It was abolished, now people start hiding.
Right.
And of course, they won't say anymore
Right.
the number that they are embarking and what they are doing. But just in that frame of time when it was legal for hundreds of years, people cannot say we don't know.
And people cannot say it did not happen. Because one of the things that we're studying now in our history class is that was one of the compromises with the Constitutional Convention was we agreed not to touch the slave trade. The government said we will allow it another 2 decades, and after those 2 decades, the government will get involved. So we know that it was legal up until the government got involved 20 years after the Constitution, and we also know that there was an illegal trade. Now, that is not damaging. Those are just facts. Now, you either will accept those facts and repent from your ways and say, let me make sure that that these facts come to light and that we don't do it again. Or you can take on that's me throwing a punch at you. But the facts are the facts that took place, and this is the impact that it had. All of those things being hidden, I think definitely for me as a believer, when you hide those truths, they come back to hurt you in some sort of way. You're not just hurting yourself, you're hurting the heart of God. And so one of the things that as we wrap up, that I love, one of the things that you said about the state of certain countries is that people tend to look at places like third world countries like Haiti, or they look at places that are struggling and go, why don't you get it together? What's the problem? But if we don't look at historically everything that they went through, everything that continues to happen, all the resources that were not just pulled out in human resources, but natural resources that were stripped from the continent, you will miss it. Yeah. And you will be confused as to why certain countries that were once flourishing with wealth are now at the bottom of the pole,
Yeah, and just beyond the human resources, the natural resources, we have to think of the destruction of the fabric of societies, how people get to be against each other, violence against each other, how trying to survive, put people in a mode that is destructive to themselves and to their people. Mm-hmm. And of course, people, participate willingly or unwillingly into bad systems. Right. Because sometimes people just try to save their own lives. Right. Sometimes people are just greedy, right. And it happens on every genocide, on every places where people were forced to be in
every place, yeah.
in unhuman situation. Right. Right. But what we need to do is really look at the systems that was put in place and the intention behind those systems. And to say the truth, it was about money. Yeah, it was about wealth. Yeah. That's the main thing. Yeah. And those who participated in it, mm-hmm. Of course, mainly who gained from it are mm-hmm. from the West. Yeah. Some people on the continent gained from it, mm-hmm. but not many or enough. Mm-hmm. And it was all about money.
Right. Yeah. And I've always said it, at the root of all of this evil is the love of money. And we can put it under other systems, social, political, psychological, at the end of the day. And to me, that is why it continues to perpetuate itself. Yeah. That the moment that you uncover that a group of people had generational wealth, had wealth that continued to flow in on the backs of humans, you then have to question, okay, this wealth that I currently have, Is it in danger? Does it belong to someone else historically?
Yeah.
And we got to deal with those questions.
We have to.
And so I think that, to my listening audience, I think that that's part of the controversy with critical race theory. It's not just that you think, okay, children will be damaged and feel guilty. It's also there's a displacement of power that comes along with dismantling and uncovering systems that kept power moving on the backs of others.
And the fear about talking about reparation.
Yeah.
It's deep there.
Yeah.
Because then people, when they start seeing the truth and realizing, wow, this is what happened, then what does it mean for us today?
Right.
First of all, certain things will need to stop.
Right. We'll have to. Yeah.
Some of the things needs to stop that is happening today.
Right.
And people don't want to stop because they want to keep accumulating.
So if you had a global cash register and you tallied up how much was taken out of the Congo, all the rubber, all of that materials, you calculated how much was taken out of Tulsa, Oklahoma, you calculated how much was taken out of, the hundreds of communities that after Reconstruction over here were destroyed and dismantled, the generational wealth there, the generational wealth throughout the continent, that's a big bill.
It is.
And I'll say that every group of people, whether it was the Japanese in war during the World War or the Jewish with the Holocaust, people want what's due to them, and that's not a criminal thing.
No.
That's not a I hate you thing. That's a factual thing. There were numbers that were destroyed financially. There were numbers of acres of land that no longer exist that we got to talk about.
We have to.
I think that's part of the...
We have to talk about it because most wealth is built through inheritance.
Correct.
And a lot of African people and Black people had nothing to inherit.
On that note, generational wealth. It's a biblical promise. The Bible says that a good man leaves an inheritance to his children's children. And so when inheritance is cut off, what are you leaving to your children? And going back to identity, what kind of man or woman does that make you if a good man leaves an inheritance? Just things to think about as we question these hot topics, these hotbeds that are coming up. The main thing that I want you to get from today is that the challenges that we're having in our school systems with uncovering history. Faith in Florida has taken on a movement to bring those things to the forefront. The major challenges that seem so big here, they're not specific to here. Those are things that are happening globally. In France, that's an issue. And in Senegal, it's an issue. In Italy, it's an issue. There's an issue of bringing out systems of disparity when it means that those in place of power get displaced. Thank you so much for your time. Drop a line below. Let us know what you think about this. As always, these are pivotal times, and we're here to talk about those topics that are near and dear to our hearts, near and dear to the media. And we're here to say, what do we think God has to say about it? What does the heart of God say when the majority of his people are fighting, have been misused and mistreated? He says, do not make my house a den of thieves. Don't sell people as merchandise. God has harsh words to say about it. Thank you so much for your time. As always, bow before God and stand before man. Thank you so much for watching.
Thank you.
Thank you. I love you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.